97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
I love coaching this football team. I love coaching those players in there.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. I'm Mike Gill, at Mike Gill Show on Twitter. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. It dropped this morning at 6 a.m. He joins me now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline as we take a look at the Eagles and the Seahawks and everything else going around this team, as it always seems to be something, but it's like we're never thankful, Geoff. It's thankful that we have a team that gives us so much to always complain about. Happy Thanksgiving, man.
Happy Thanksgiving to you. Yes, we should be thankful for all the things that we have to occupy our hot air.
Is there another team? Is there another team in the league that is so bad, that is so talked about all the time? I mean, you turn on national places, they're constantly talking about Wentz and Pederson and the Eagles. I mean, this is a team that's 3-6-1. No one should be paying attention to this bunch.
Yeah, most of the teams that are bad in the NFL this year are teams that you probably expected to be bad. The Jaguars are bad. The Bengals had some excitement with Burrow, but they're bad. The Jets are bad. Maybe outside of the Houston Texans, the Eagles might be among
Dallas,
the most disappointing teams.
Dallas,
yeah, that's
Minnesota.
True. Dallas. At least Dallas has an excuse. I mean, they lost their starting quarterback and.
San Francisco, same problem, injuries. I don't know about Atlanta.
Right.
They had some hopes, I guess. You have Ryan, Julio Jones, Ridley, Gurley. I would imagine you hoping better for 3-7.
That's very fair. Yeah, and that's kind of been their story for the last few years, though.
It is, but this team, it just seems because of the head coach dynamic and the quarterback dynamic that we have gone over a lot. But let's start with what Doug Pederson said or didn't say today. It was almost like Rob Motti had to help him out again. And I don't know that he even answered Rob's question in a manner that was helping. He was asked, kind of pressed a little bit, whether or not he was going to change quarterbacks on Monday. He said, not on Wednesday, I'm not. It was like, that's a precarious answer. Didn't you think that was a little bit of an odd way for him to answer that question by Tim McManus?
Yes, I did. I did think it was an odd way to answer a very slam dunk question. It kind of goes back to the Brett Favre comments, where there was a real slam dunk answer that 99.9% of head coaches are going to give, but Doug likes to fall into that 0.1% who leaves everybody guessing.
He does, and then he follows it up with the fact that I think about a lot of things, and it's almost like, hey, Carson, if you're the quarterback, you just want your coach to it's like the kid who yearns for his father to accept him. He wants his father to give him a hug, Doug, Carson Wentz is sitting there like, Doug, can you please just give me a hug for once? And Pederson, this, cold father, just can't do it.
I don't know if it's that Doug is trying to send a message to Carson through the media, or if Doug is really just a thick Brooklyn accent away from becoming Rich Kotite right in front of our eyes. I honestly don't know, because if he's not changing quarterbacks and there's nothing to it, then there's really no excuse for the type of press conference he gave today, other than just Kotite level incompetence in answering a simple question.
It's funny that you mentioned Kotite. I went down a rabbit hole the other night and ended up finding all this Rich Kotite stuff. I didn't realize that he actually played in the league, and I'm thinking to myself, this guy was so bad, so poorly regarded. But you make an interesting point that Kotite actually had double-digit winning seasons multiple times. I mean, it wasn't like he was a 3-13 guy every single year. So I guess the question is with Pederson was this a guy who had some early success, and it was kind of a flash in the pan the way things are going right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. By the way, that's a really 2020 type of thing to do, just get lost in a Rich Kotite rabbit hole. That's one rabbit hole a lot of people
I got a great quick Rich Kotite. So I dated this girl in college who was best friends with his daughter. So she called the room and I answered the phone and she said, "Yeah, this is Adrian Kotite." And I said, "Is Rich Kotite your father?" She's like, "Yeah." I was like, "He's terrible."
You did not do that.
I
Did
swear.
You really?
I swear. Yep.
Oh, you were that guy?
I mean, we were at having a couple cocktails in the dorm room, the phone rings, and I'm thinking she's joking, right? Who says, yeah, that's my dad? Like, I'm not, wait a second. I didn't realize, the girl I was dating's from Staten Island. It started to make some sense.
Oh, that's unbelievable. When I was in college, not to get too far off track, but my roommate, who is normally a level-headed person, but he's a Pittsburgh Pirates fan, and he was so upset about Stan Belinda blowing one of the playoff games. I think that's the Francisco Cabrera game. My memory doesn't remember, but he just happened. We were at Penn State, and he happened to notice that Belinda was from a town called Port Matilda, which is right outside of State College, which really is in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, and that Belinda was from there. So he found Belinda's parents in the phone book, called them up, and cursed at him because Stan had blown a game. I couldn't believe it. But
oh man.
Anyway, back to the story. Yeah, so I actually look at Mike McCarthy as someone who I've been kind of comparing Doug to a little bit, in that Mike McCarthy won the Super Bowl obviously early with Aaron Rodgers, and I always felt earlier during that run, and even after, I think the next year they went 15-1, right? And they lost to the Giants though in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But as a real good play caller and just a sound coach, and everything he seemed to do offensively really worked. And of course he had Aaron Rodgers, but remember, Aaron lost a ton of people that year that they won the Super Bowl. And even in the Super Bowl itself, he lost Donald Driver, I believe, and they still wind up winning games. And I just thought, man, this guy is an amazing play caller and really good offensive mind. And then the years go on, they don't win, the offense gets stale, there's no seemingly adaptation out of the playbook. And then by the end of the career, and now even with Dallas, you wonder, was this guy smoking mirrors all along? Was everything we thought about him just completely wrong? And I know that people are starting to feel that way about Doug Pederson and the offensive construct.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we've battled all the last 2 weeks about who's more to blame, Pederson or Wentz. And I would say, look, the way I saw Jared Goff the other night, is he special? No. But you know what he is? He's pretty darn accurate. He throws the ball where it needs to be, and he lets those other guys do things. And that's the one thing. It's like, when I watch the Eagles, do I think the offense is special? No. Are there guys open? Yeah. And if I just get Carson going from 58% to 63%, which isn't asking a lot, and it's not great in this league, but I think that does change where this team might be right now. Is just, even if Pederson is who he is, I don't think Carson being so tied to what the coach is a good thing for Carson Wentz in terms of, the long-term future of him. If this is all he is and the coach means that much to him, then maybe he wasn't all that good.
That's a really interesting viewpoint, and I can, I started thinking about what you said on so many layers. I agree with you. If the quarterback is just 3 to 4 throws better a game, imagine with every game that they seemingly play being 1 or 2 possessions, how much of a difference that would make. You could probably make that argument. Like, let's say you're Hunter, right? Hunter would say, well, if Doug just put Miles Sanders out in the flat every once in a while, had him beat somebody off the line of scrimmage, that also could be the 1 play or 2 plays that you get if you roll Carson out of the pocket that make a difference in the win or loss. So it's very symbiotic. I don't even think it matters to argue over who could be better more, because I think they're both in different ways failing each other. I think protection is the other part of this that we haven't really mentioned. I took a real deep dive into their third down struggles on the podcast that dropped this morning. And, I tried to chart whether I felt each failed third down last game was protection, play design, or Carson Wentz bad decision or hesitation. And out of 10 plays, I had 4 were on Carson, 4 were on protection, 2 were on play design. And so it really shows you that there's so much going on here that has contributed to the kind of mess of an offense. But if I were to even concede to your point that if Carson was just a little bit better, Mike, like you said, 58 to 63%, would they be better as an offense? And would that make a difference? And my answer to you would probably be yes. And maybe instead of 3-6-1, they've got a win or 2 more. Maybe, and that's a better record. But at the same time, if he's still only a little bit better, the team might be better, but it's not where it's supposed to be. And I think that's the bigger viewpoint here. Is that
but
even
the
if
big
the team
thing is, Jeff,
500, right? They're not.
The big thing with that, though, Jeff, is the question about your franchise then is, okay, we're not where we want to be, but we also aren't saying the problem with our franchise is the quarterback. Now, we're not where we want to be, but the problem might be the biggest problem, which we didn't think was a problem. And monetarily, they can't afford for that to be the problem. So wouldn't you feel better that if he was playing better and they were just average, but the rest of the roster was a problem? Now you're wondering if your biggest problem is your most important position.
There might be some validity to that, Mike, but I feel like when you have a player like Carson Wentz, who you've seen in the past be as great as he's been, then your expectation every year is to be really, really good, not just even pretty good despite some struggling pieces around him. So even if the team right now was, instead of 3-6-1, let's say they were 5-5 or 6-4 going into a really difficult stretch here, in which you're not sure if they can win, 3 of these 4 games or all 4. I think at the end of the day, knowing this town, knowing us as a media, it's still, that's not good enough, and it still would have brought questions upon the head coach and the quarterback.
Possible, but I mean, you're probably right that if you're 5-5, but I think it would be, well, you've had all these injuries, because I contend he's played pretty consistently the last 3 seasons. Even the year in 2017, his completion percentage was better the next season. He threw 7 interceptions in all 3 of the last 3 seasons. His completion percentage was similar, 69, 64. He's been very similar. That's why the concern for me comes in is that, man, even if Doug Pederson is the same exact coach that he was and it's the same offense and the same play calls, then he should be running the offense at the same level with the same offense. But the problem is, even if these are the same plays, he's running the same offense way worse than he once did. And that's why I'm having this big concern about, holy moly, you know the situation with the cap. They can't do anything about it. He has to work for them.
He really does. They're in a really bad situation if, 5 weeks from now, this franchise believes that Carson Wentz is unfixable. I don't know that they will be, even if he does lose 4 games. They may take the viewpoint that they just need so many other wholesale changes and perhaps some coaching changes to get through to him. But they already kind of have a long list here of coaching changes on the offensive side, including this year.
How many more times can they go down that road of just,
that's right? My point. Like, you're rearranging the furniture of the Titanic at some point, so it's going to be a really interesting December here, and we're going to find out if Carson is just so broken that this team really has to kind of wonder what it's going to do going forward.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, the Inside the Birds podcast. You guys talked about source tape review of some of the problems. Carson's slow trigger, and there's so many plays that are out there, and now, people break these plays down, and they're slowing things down. Then you got former players chiming in, well, the play's not that. It is what it is in terms of they're not always Carson's fault. You get hit from the backside, the ball floats out, there's a guy that looks open, maybe that's not who you're supposed to throw it to, but that's just one play. Is it that he doesn't trust the guys he has? Is he not trusting the play call? Why are we seeing this indecisiveness?
That is a great question. I'm going to assume here, since no one really knows the full answer, but I do think that it's not that he doesn't trust the guys. I think Carson no longer trusts himself. So I guess that's really a crisis of confidence, because there are plays and throws that he would normally make that aren't there. And I remember seeing that even week 1, week 2, week 3 in the season, and perhaps that's from taking a lot of hits. Perhaps it was from turning the ball over so much that he really became scared to throw certain throws now that he would normally make, because he's had so many interceptions that he's afraid to now throw an interception. I feel like this became kind of, being scattershot is the term. You heard that about Eli Manning later in his career, although he did continue to throw interceptions. But you saw a different kind of Eli, not as aggressive as he had been in the past at the end there. And I don't know, maybe that's Carson. Maybe he's thrown too many interceptions and taken so many hits, and he just doesn't trust anything anymore, from his ability to make the play to the protection's ability to allow him the time to make the play.
Yeah, I know when, you take a look at, I think it was Mike Sealski asked the question about the injuries, and you wonder how much of a toll that's taken on who he was and who he is. I mean, in 17, he didn't have all these injuries, and he seemed that he was, more elusive, just quicker, twitchy, getting out of the pocket. Everything now is mechanical and slow, and he just doesn't seem like the same athlete he was 3 years ago. And you wonder how much those hits and the injuries have taken a toll on decision-making, his the fluidity in his hips and the ability to, make throws that he could make a couple years ago and maybe he can't now, because there was a lot of tight windows that he fit the ball in 3 years ago that now are misses, possible interceptions, inaccurate throws.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a stark contrast. You remember his first 3 games? Remember his first game against Cleveland in 2016? He was so aggressive. He leads a scoring drive on his first possession. There was a play late in that game where he threw a pass on a cross to Jordan Matthews that he put between a linebacker and a corner, where a lot of quarterbacks wouldn't have even made that kind of throw. But he had no problem, no fear, zipped it in there. It was just such a tremendous, kind of what we felt at the time, a harbinger of things to come. A guy who was just fearless and gunslinger, and all those Brett Favre comparisons or Aaron Rodgers comparisons came into play. And now, several years later, as you mentioned, the hit toll has risen on him. He's probably been the most hit quarterback in the league this year, and he's had those injuries. And I do have to wonder if that just plays a part in the mentality when he's out there. It's just like, oh my God, how many times am I going to get sandwiched by 200-300-pound defensive linemen today? And I'm not trying to make excuses for the guy. Every quarterback has to deal with that. Deshaun Watson has been getting hit 100 times a year for the last 2 or 3 years, and he's actually having a better year this year, even though the record isn't there for them. But you can never know. You never know what's between a guy's ears and what he's thinking in that regard.
Right. Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds Pod. I don't know. Did you read Sheil Kapadia's piece at The Athletic from about Wentz? It was about 10 days ago or so.
I really did not.
All right. It's a tremendous piece about just what has happened to this guy, and he broke down the windows that he's had, and just you got to check it out. But one of the things that he mentions in there is, and I've been talking a lot about this the last couple of days, and you just kind of mentioned it, and I think you guys talked about it during Inside the Birds, is the pass protection issues. Is that the offensive line that they have had in the Wentz era has been pretty much intact. I mean, yeah, they lost Peters, but you had Vaitai, who was a viable guy, but the other 4 guys were there. They've never really had multiple guys out at one time, and now they are just getting spoon-fed what other teams deal with on a routinely yearly basis, it seems like, and the Eagles have avoided in the 4 years of the Carson Wentz era.
They have certainly been fortunate to have both a lot of talent on the offensive line, and I shouldn't say fortunate. They put it together, so kudos to them, but not having a rash of injuries like other teams. I mean, we've talked about teams like the Vikings and other teams that have actually made the playoffs and been decent despite having just bottom level starters at several offensive line positions, and how hard it is even to have a player like Hala Paluti Vaitai, who, we might microscopically say, oh man, this guy gets beat here, or he gives up this and that. But as a swing tackle or reserve swing tackle, you'd be lucky to find guys of his caliber starting on 10 to 12 teams in the league right now. So, yeah, the Eagles have always, and Carson has always enjoyed the luxury of having a high-quality offensive line. And it's almost like karma in 2020 have conspired against them, because it's not like they've had a few injuries that have taken that away. Like the Cowboys have had a few injuries on their offensive line. They've had, what did they play? I think they played 5 different offensive line combinations just against the Browns in just that one game. I mean, it's crazy what they've had to deal with up front.
It's a big thing that I don't think, and offensive line's never sexy. And it's not something that we want to talk about. But like Dallas, they got great weapons, but when their line was broken, they were a mess. I know the quarterback being hurt is a big problem there too, but I mean, part of the problem was their offensive line was a disaster, and you saw how bad Dallas looked offensively. Now they're starting to get some of their offensive linemen back, and they're somewhat competent all of a sudden. The offensive line is not sexy, but it's a huge factor in all of this, and you wonder how much of a factor that plays. It also goes into what you just said, Jeff. Give them credit. They've built that line. What did they miss on? The high-profile first-round pick, wide receiver, or second-round pick. When you miss on the high-profile picks, I think sometimes it gets blown out of proportion, but when we're trying to find what's wrong with this team, how much is the way that it has been built goes into that?
I mean, I think that, it definitely goes into it. You've got
Is it blown out of proportion, or is it at the top of the list?
No, I mean, I think that it's got to be right up there. I mean, you have a second-round pick from last year who's now inactive, giving you nothing. You have a first-round pick from last year who's injured, so you get nothing out of two of your top 3 picks last year, which are 2 of the top, I think, 57 picks in the entire draft. You're not able to get anything from. And by the way, and I'm not saying Andre Dillard was a miss. He's hurt, not his fault, but let's not pretend there weren't some real big questions about him at training camp going into the year. There were, and they were legit questions about him. And now this year, you've got your basically no production from a backup quarterback that you took in the second round, which was a philosophy that is certainly questionable. You've got your third-round linebacker who played against the Browns for 16 snaps. It's the first elongated time that he's played all year long, and the results were mixed. He's the guy who left Austin Hooper wide open on that play that would have been a touchdown if Baker didn't ridiculously sail it over Hooper's head there. So he's got a lot to learn. I mean, that's a key position for this team, linebacker, that has hurt them last year and both this year. So that's 4 picks right there. And then, I mean, you go to the 2018 draft. I think that's where you get Dallas Goedert. You have no first-round pick. You get Dallas Goedert in the second round. You had no third-round pick because I think that's the one you traded for Tate. Am I right? I forget why, but they had no third-round pick. In the fourth round, they got Avonte Maddox, who I think we all thought was going to be a decent player. He has not been decent this year. He's clearly meant for the slot, not for the outside. And now I'm starting to have questions if he can be an adequate slot corner. We have to find out. So, that's 3 drafts right there. That's 5 players alone who, let's just say they were good to decent players. They could be helping you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and we've gone through, it's funny, one of our listeners, because we went back and forth on this about how being a sports fan, Jeff, has changed to where you used to want your team to win, build up the ladder, and, maybe you make the playoffs and you win a playoff game and then you get knocked out and then the next year you come back. Now people, it's either, if I can't win the Super Bowl, I want to lose and get a draft pick, to which I say, the draft pick only works out about 50% of the time in the first round. And by the way, we found out that number is even high. That a first-round pick hits on 50% of the time. A listener went and did the whole draft for the last 5 years. 39%, I think it was it 39% or 24% of first-round picks work out. So teams are losing, or fans want to lose, to try to get a first-round pick that only works out about 25% of the time. What a world we live in.
It's a terrible philosophy. I hate when fans say that because clearly they don't understand the statistics involved. You're right. In fact, not only that, I believe I've read or heard from GM saying that your Pro Bowl player, your real superstar, multi-year Pro Bowl type players, 65 to 70% of them come in the top 10. So once you start to get even into that 11 to 15 range, now you're just hoping for a guy, statistically, who's going to be a very good, solid contributor, maybe makes a Pro Bowl for you. But, it doesn't always happen.
Right.
You get a Derek Barnett who's been pretty good this year, but not great. 2 picks later, I believe, was Marlon Humphrey, who's been a very good corner and probably, if he didn't make a Pro Bowl, probably will soon, and we'll see. And, Jonathan Allen's been good, but he's also been hurt. So you get past, that 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, it's really a toss-up on how great of a player you're really going to get.
And it comes down to this. The good teams find guys, whether they draft 7th, 17th, 27th, 37th, 47th, 127. If you have good people in your front office, you shouldn't be hoping your team loses, because guess what happens? The bad teams that draft at the top of the draft make mistakes all the time anyway, that you can win your games, stay where you draft, and still find good talent.
I agree with you. I mean, look at the Steelers, man. Just look at what they do. They went into this year, right? They knew they had a very good wide receiver in Juju Smith-Schuster. They have another pretty good wide receiver who's probably an emerging just as good as Juju in Deontay Johnson, right? And they used a second-round pick anyway And without having a first-round pick, by the way, they used a second-round pick, I believe, on Chase Claypool, who is going to just seamlessly transition in there and he looks like another guy who's going to be a very, very good wide receiver. And that, to me, tells me that they stuck to their board. They didn't say, oh, we already have good wide receivers, so let's force-feed ourselves a cornerback where they traditionally struggle or a different position. They just went with the best player on their board, and look how important that Chase Claypool has been to their success. I mean, I question whether the Eagles really do that with a lot of their picks, whether they really truly stick to their board.
He's Geoff Mosher. Make sure you listen to the Inside the Birds podcast. Subscribe, rate, review. It drops Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays at 6 a.m. You can listen to that on your drive to work or anytime during the day. And also the Inside the Birds pregame show on all your social media platforms is Monday night this week for the Monday night game. So those guys do a great job with that. And happy Thanksgiving to you and your family and everybody. And we will catch up with you soon, Geoff.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, Josh, all the listeners. It's been a very interesting year. I appreciate you guys having us on at 4 o'clock and look forward to doing it longer.
Absolutely, pal. We will talk to Geoff again. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.